What does home look like when your world's in between? We're following stories of Guyanese migrants, first kicking off in Richmond Hill, Queens, or what is better known as Little Guyana, to visualize the impacts of migration. We are also observing the items that people have brought with them, such as clothes, jewelry, photos, or anything else that grounds them to their definition of home. In this first episode, we will be speaking to Farood, Annie, and Ariana, all of whom belong to Generation 1.5, which means that they were born in Guyana but migrated here in their adolescence. We will be getting their outlook and how this migration altered their sense of community and has impacted their pursuit of belonging.
I'm Anastasia Singh, my pronouns are she, her, and I immigrated from Nova, Myconi to Queens, New York when I was 8 years old.
My name is Farood Amiel, my pronouns are he, him. I'm of an Indo-Indigenous background from Skeldon, Guyana, and I immigrated to New York City, Queens at the age of 2.
My name is Ariana Perbach, and I migrated from Essequibo Coast to Queens, New York. Our papers were in to migrate to Queens, New York for about 10 years. So during my childhood, it was always something my parents would talk about. Oh, you don't need to worry about what secondary school you need to go to or what college or like what you need to do with your future. It's just keep in mind that the end game is that you're moving to America. You're moving for a better future there. So think more of your future there and not in Guyana, in Essequibo.
My family immigrated when I was 8 years old. They just told my brother and I to pack a suitcase, and it was my very first time on a plane, and they just said we're going on a vacation. And when we reached America, my family said after 2 weeks that we were actually not going back to Guyana and we were just going to end up living here.
So coming to America at the age of 2 years old with my parents who were in their mid-20s, which is crazy to think about because I'm now their age, things were really hard for us. My parents my father came from a prominent family in Skeldon, thinking of a house with a bathroom that's fully working, electricity, and then suddenly we were pushed into New York City, living in a basement. Well, you could call it that. It was like a converted cellar boiler room, and it was one bedroom and we were sleeping on a floor mattress.
We ended up in a one-bedroom basement. It was my brother, my parents, and myself, and I rarely got to see my parents on those days. It was my brother was forced to become the parent for myself and also taking care of himself at the time, and he was only 9 years old.
At first, I would say the first 2 months, we've had a great number of family members who are we're so excited that you're here. We're so excited for the future you're gonna build. But that slowly died down and trickled down.
Growing up, there was so much anger and resentment in my house, especially between my parents. This always fighting for money, fighting for survival, fighting for needs, and this tension that was just building up.
The dynamic of my immediate family has changed in so many ways that I could not have imagined.
I really got to see a different side of my parents that I honestly wished that I wouldn't have been exposed to before.
First, I do think it's a lot of outside influences, or when you migrate, there's a lot of factors that changes your family dynamic, such as where you live, your career.
But it was also recognizing that the trauma that they had to experience being in America and being under that white supremacist gaze, and they couldn't handle that, so they ended up passing that trauma on to my brother and I.
I never really understood it until I got older and actually recognized that my parents assimilated to a life that was worse for them in many ways.
Back home, my mom did not work at all. She was a housewife, but now she has to go to a job every single day. In addition to her full-time job, now she sees cleaning, cooking as a chore, but back home it was something that she enjoyed. So it's this changing of things that were once fun or meaningful to you are now drifting away.
They came from a pocket of privilege into Guyana, and now they were in a working class society. And that really took a toll for us, and that really determined how we grew up, the experiences we had, and also let me know how much class played a role not only in Guyana from how we had those experiences, but also here in New York City.
And so with my dad, every day he regrets living here or like moving to Queens, moving to America in general. And so he had more of a free lifestyle where he was more of an entrepreneur, had his own business, but now having to work for someone else, that also dictates the frustrations he would express when he comes home. That would also dictate how tired he is, how tired he might not be to have time for his kids or spend more time doing things that he would love. Just like chilling in the backyard, like gardening or like barbecue every weekend. It's something that he seldomly does now because of all these responsibilities that he has to like to upkeep this family.
It was this assumption that they came here and they sacrificed so much, so I needed to figure out how to get a degree, how to be the best in school, how to make no mistakes possible. And it was like on this highest pedestal ever because my success determined their success.
There's like a lot of pressure on like the siblings or my siblings and I or like the kids of like how much you can achieve, what can you attain. And so it's more measured by your success and not how connected or belong you can be as a family.
Growing up with that type of pressure and that lack of emotional context and empathy in the household really just had a bad effect. For years, I was chasing a dream that was unobtainable, but it was not my dream. Going to college, getting multiple degrees, making money, and it was so rooted in capitalism, but also it was rooted in making sure my family doesn't have to be poor anymore.
Going through all these trials and tribulations together, but it's more of like a very separate or a disconnected dynamic where everything is more based on how can we survive, and there's always this survival mode and never something where you can just be and enjoy the moment.
And I think about a lot of times growing up when we didn't have access to food, when we had to drink cereal like with water or soda. And I feel like that, I don't want to say poverty mindset because that's so mean and it implies something that the system put onto my parents. But growing up in a system that just lacked empathy for people like my parents that come to America, it put me in this constant state of survival. I feel like I've been trying to survive in America even when I'm sleeping in my bed comfortably at night because of this diaspora.
Yeah, and so different like health implications, mental health implications have arisen, and it has like truly changed the dynamic of how we connected back home compared to now.
How has Queens become a home to you, if it has at all?
Growing up, Queens really helped me shape and accept who I was. So when I first immigrated, I actually moved to Minnesota, and then from Minnesota I moved to Jersey, and then from Jersey I moved to New York. So in Minnesota and Jersey, I grew up around all white folks. I even remember my first time enrolling in an elementary school in New Jersey, and the school administrator was like, oh look, there's more chocolate monkeys coming to this school.
I'll get told this narrative of we go to school, get our degrees, do the right things, assimilate, dress like them, speak better English. We're going to have an amazing life. From us having an amazing life, our parents' sacrifice has been fulfilled in essence. And that was a common lie that was told to all of us.
And it wasn't until I went to Queens that everyone looked like me, everyone sounded like me. And for the first time, I really felt like my accent wasn't judged, and there was space for me to really be myself and not have to worry about hiding my identity. But over time, I realized that even though Queens did shape me in a lot of ways, it also limited me, and it limited the progress that I was able to make, because there were so many times when I tried to create a community with other Indo-Guyanese folks, and it felt as though I was only allowed to bring one side of myself. And it felt as though every time I showed up as Guyanese in those communities, I had to go to set a standard. There was a bar of how Guyanese I could be, and I had to hit that bar every single time.
It was very evident. I would go to school and I didn't have the same common experience as other Indo-Caribbeans that immigrated here. A lot of them had support, family structures that already existed.
In terms of community and belonging, I did feel a great sense of disconnect when I migrated here.
We talk so much about this experience being full of culture and full of love, and I feel like I never related to that when we talked about it in community contexts, because I related to a different aspect of it. I recognized my class by the time I was in kindergarten. I'm from class, I mean class structure of low income, middle class, etc.
One thing that I truly miss is the freedom of just running over to your neighbor's yard. If you see them peeking out their window, you can just run over, in Essequibo, you can just run over to your neighbor's yard if you're bored, and you just go and play and you like talk and you do whatever. But here, you cannot go to your neighbor's yard and just be like, what's up? And it's more of like you're living with people that may have different similar experiences, but you're not connecting in that way, and you're not having that conversation of like, oh, how can we be of help to each other? How can we support each other? And so finding your own space and like cultivating communities in different areas, different spaces is important, especially now at my university, we have Caribbean Student Association, and that's one of my main mode of cultivating a community on campus within a predominantly white institution. In other spaces, being around creatives or people who are amplifying stories of migration journeys, of what it's like to live in somewhere that is now home and what home means to you.
I don't really know what it means to be Guyanese in the essence of growing up there, growing up in the educational system, accessing the system, voting, just being in the village and having that interaction with folks. But at the same time, I don't feel like New York City is my home too. I have this sense of displacement that lives within me, and I don't have the answer to it, and I think none of us do, but we're building a collective answer, and I'm speaking to a lot of folks that resonate with that. But I guess all in all, my immigrant identity has been built around finding a home and trying to find out that home could actually exist in a world that has been so heavily colonized, and my identity and my lineage that's been so affected by colonization.
It felt as though I wasn't being genuine enough to myself. So I had to recognize that even though this place has built me and has really created who I was, it wasn't the place that I was meant to be in forever.
One thing that I've been really jumping into lately is discovering my bloodline. I think one of the repercussions of colonization in Guyana was there was a lack of documentation of families, where they came from and their ancestry. I was privileged enough to have some family members that made maps of my Indo side, but also there was two other sides that were unmapped. My great-grandfather was an overseer in Guyana, meaning he was a white man from England. And in some ways he owned people. He did own people. He most likely owned my family. And it was also funny because there's a romanticization of colonizers in my country. For example, in my family, they spoke about this white man who was my great-grandfather as falling in love with my great-grandmother, and they had a family and it was beautiful, and he had to leave her behind when he had to go back to England. And after spending a lot of time just going through documents of census records, because white folks have census records from 1,000 years before, finding out and finding documents with my great-grandfather's name being listed as an overseer for a sugar plantation in Guyana, and him importing and exporting both enslaved black people and indentured servants of Indo-Caribbean background was revelating to me.
Connected to my ancestry was a really significant part of my life. Growing up, I was always taught about the Indian side of my family, meaning what my family was like when we were still living in India. So I knew a lot about the village we came from, and I knew that my great-grandfather, whose name was Samunder Singh, came on a boat to Guyana, and he lived here with his family. But I never really knew about what life was like for my family once they actually reached Guyana. And I realized over time that the reason that my family didn't share that history was because of shame, and it was because of this feeling that being an indentured servant all made us seem as lesser compared to folks back in India. And that was something I had to unlearn within myself of what does it mean to be Indo-Caribbean, and what does it mean to not only honor the Indian side of my family that my ancestors have worked hard to preserve and continue down the line, but also what does it mean to honor the Caribbeanness within me as well too? What does it mean to honor the part of me that resided within Guyana and the part of my ancestry that connected with Guyana and took that culture within them?
It led me to realize I need to start addressing the violence and trauma that's related in my bloodline. And I highly believe that trauma is genetic and we pass down trauma from each bloodline to another. And recognizing there is this big aspect of colonization within my bloodline, and that my great-grandfather was essentially a master.
One of the main things for me, like when I think back of how that intersected, was growing up thinking that my grandma would tell me stories of like Anansi the spider. And I didn't realize until much later that that story actually originated from the West African region. And so seeing that gap and seeing that merge between the two cultures really made me aware of how Guyana has such a rich culture and such a rich history on its own, and it was unfair of me to only hold on to the history that existed prior to that and not delve into what it meant during that time period. So I'm going to show two tattoos that mean the most to me and really tell my story and the story of my ancestors. So the first one is of a paper crane and some hibiscus flowers. The paper crane is a representation of hope, and to me, after surviving 2 suicide attempts because of my identity and because of not being able to deal with the trauma that was passed down lineage after lineage, I was finally able to be comfortable with myself. And so this paper crane gives me the hope that I can not just heal myself, but I can also heal the pain that my ancestors have had to deal with as well too. And so the hibiscus flowers, hibiscus are very commonly found in the Caribbean, but they also share another meaning for me personally of they have a very significant purpose in Hinduism, which I feel like is my personal spiritual practice and has really helped me a lot with navigating everything. The other one I have is of an alien with multiple flowers. Each of the flowers actually serve a really important purpose. For red, I got it for passion because I've always told growing up that women must be seen and not heard. But the red for me represents that passion within myself to always fight and to always have that fire burning within. The sunflowers give me strength. It reminds me that wherever there is sun, there is room to grow and there's room to thrive. So I always want to be that light within myself to keep reminding myself to go further and go beyond even what my ancestors could have dreamed of their lineage doing. And so the alien that I got was really representative of me not feeling American enough, but me also not feeling Guyanese enough. So never, even when I visited Guyana, I always felt like this really wasn't my home. This wasn't the place that I grew up in. But even being in America, this isn't the culture that I want to be a part of. This isn't the culture that I feel myself resonating with. And so the alien almost represents that I don't really know where my home is, and I don't know what a home looks like for me. So it's something that I'm still continuously building and something that I'm still trying to find a definition of. My decision to get a tattoo really stemmed from the sort of like rebelliousness of me wanting to go against my family and doing something that they wouldn't approve of, because to me that was the start of creating my own story. But it was interesting because I later found out that my great-grandmother actually had tattoos herself because she was from a tribal region in Rajasthan where it was common for women to have tattoos. So in a way, it almost felt like me continuing the tradition of tattooing my own body was paying homage to a woman that I've never met, and yet we shared the similarity.
I think that also relates to the immigrant diaspora being a refugee identity. You don't really know where you come from, And then you get asked the question a lot, do you want to go back to Guyana? And I kind of feel like if I go back to Guyana, I'm in essence a gentrifier. I'm kind of lost in my own country and lost in this country and endlessly searching for a home that I feel like doesn't exist. And I'm spending the rest of my 20s trying to build a home and trying to find out what that home looks like and what I want in my house in a figurative language. And I think about going back to Guyana a lot, but I also know that I don't have Guyanese culture within me.
So for me, practicing ancestral magic was really important for me because it helped me to honor and speak to my ancestors that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to communicate with. And now I feel I have a much stronger bond with them, and I have a much stronger bond to my identity as well too.
This is one of the few items that I brought when I migrated to Queens, and it's my baby dress, and having it close by means a lot in terms of remembering where I came from, and this can also be something that's passed on to my next generation. However, I did not bring my baby photo albums, or I didn't get to bring the trophies and accomplishments of going through schooling there in Guyana, and that was really disheartening at the moment. My mom was like, the photo albums would be a lot of weight, so it's everything was measured with how much weight it would be compared to how much value it would have to you.
This watch belonged to my uncle, who was basically my second father and raised me from a very young age coming into America. He passed away recently in January, and I know I did not touch upon him and his experiences and my experience with him, but he shaped me so much in life with so much empathy and grace. And I really do hope there is one day where I am comfortable and healed enough to speak about him in such a light. But for now, I just really want to share this watch that he used to wear every day, and I wear it every day now, to really guide and center me and give me the courage to keep doing what I do. I've been thinking a lot about how my perceptions of immigration has changed from being younger and having this idea projected by my parents, but also Western civilization, that we're moving here for opportunity, you know? America has the best schools, it has the best healthcare, it has the best housing, you know? We come here to make sure that we are able to access a certain privilege that we don't have back home. And then growing up, I realized, what privilege are we really accessing, and how much has colonization really defined not only my family, but families that look like me in the global South to move into America? You know, when I think about this pipeline of immigration and why folks move, it's often because there's lack of economic development, you know, educational opportunity, and also a history of enslavement and colonization and imperialism from the very same countries we're immigrating to. I think that's a really fucked up pipeline when you think about it. We talk about the school to prison pipeline, but there is an immigration pipeline. You know, imperialistic countries like America, United Kingdom, the Netherlands, European dominant countries, they come into the global South, destroy our societies, our civilizations, simply just exit out with no accountability. And then suddenly we're all moving to those countries, and then we're losing our languages, and we're losing our culture, and we're becoming first generation, second generation, third generation immigrants. And I call it the assimilation pipeline. That's what I've really come to believe of why I actually immigrated here, and why my family immigrated here. Because they were projected this ideal of Western dominance and Western centralized information that if they leave their countries, instead of staying there and rebuilding it, it's often better. And I think that also talks about my experience as being someone who left Guyana so young.
How has life changed for you since being here, and what impact has it had on you and your family?
Life has changed a lot, and in different areas and circumstances. And so when my parents were like, you'll have a better educational opportunity here and more of a greater foundation in terms of career-wise, I do see that impact. I now go to New York University and I'm studying public health management, and I'm really thinking back more of how I can connect it to making migration journey easier for immigrants in terms of health and well-being. And so in this study I can connect back to what I've experienced and what others who are migrating experience. I think after moving, having this, connecting your worth or your success to like more than where you're from, has been very present in my life, and I don't really like that. But in terms of my academic journey, my education journey, I always reminisce and listen to this song by Popcorn, Where We Come From, to keep on instilling that what I'm doing is for a greater purpose, and the work that I hope to achieve in like public health and immigration health is more towards giving back, but giving back in a way that is helpful, but also plummets like a really great change. And so I know there's always going to be migration. People are always going to be migrating. So like making that journey easier for them, or having resources that I did not have, or having connections that would have helped me better acclimate to the environment.
I feel like I'm finally at their age, where yes, I understand why they went through that mindset, but there's so much resentment from my parents, and I think there's a generational gap that I'm still trying to solve and understand, and find empathy for them while still addressing the way they traumatized me.
I will always reminisce and remember where I came from, but I also recognize that a part of migrating is towards a bigger purpose of who I want to become and learning from my past.
It took a long time for me, and it took years of unlearning for me to recognize that that story and that immigration story, while I am so immensely grateful for them, for all the sacrifices that they did and everything that they did to survive, that did not mean that I have to live the rest of my life being in debt to them, or being in debt to my ancestors that came from India to Guyana. My story is mine to tell and mine to write, and I can honor them and do so, and still continue to let go of the guilt and remorse that I might feel from that.